Okay, so unbelievable. We are now in chapter 7. So we're continuing this series of M&EZ, monitoring and evaluation made easy. Yes, it has to be that way so that everyone can understand this is not supposed to be complicated. It's not supposed to be like, wow, foreign rocket science. No, this is supposed to be something everyone can grapple with, everyone can understand and apply in the daily practices, especially if you have interventions, if you have projects, if you work in development. So today, chapter 7, we are further developing from the times when we have talked about conceptual frameworks and about indicators and about types of data, quantitative, qualitative, etc. Now, interesting thing is, how are you going to get those indicators? How are you going to get the data? And this is where we're going to talk and we're going to discuss about questionnaire construction. So when you run a survey, obviously you need an instrument. If you're going to collect data, okay, what is it going to made of? What are you going to ask, or what are you going to observe? What are you going to register, right? Yeah, we're going to talk about other things like data transcripts, analysis and such. But for now, questionnaire construction. So, as the title will say, it's easier said than done. So, although M&EZ, we need to understand some key concepts and key things. So, just a quick disclosure: I'm going to use mostly, not all of it, but mostly questionnaires developed under what is called the demographic and health surveys. I worked, there for a few years, and I keep in touch with them, and I will give you the website. You can go because it's an open package. It's USAID funded, the government of the United States, although other countries and also the governments themselves in countries are more and more funding themselves, the realization of this survey. It's usually a national survey done every 4 or 5 years about those aspects, demography, how many people are in the home and what services they have or not. And then, of course, there's a lot of focus on the health part of it, but other aspects as well. So I'm going to use that dhsprogram.com and at internet. Okay, so we'll. Why is it important that then we formulate a good questionnaire? It's obvious, right? There's this expensive. We've talked already about that it costs $1 million or more in many countries. It's usually run every 4 or 5 years. It's a huge operation. We're going to talk about training. We're going to talk about the whole preparation in a country, and then the conduct. That takes several months, anyways. And people go, and it's a sample survey. So of course you go to those, but usually you have to go to all different locations, at least regional geographical locations, especially, remember, in sampling, especially if they are different, if some places are mountainous, other places are lowland, maybe some places have different cultural aspects than others, etc. So when you have that, a huge operation, you need to get it right. And so questions, registration, data collection, it needs to be, you don't want to waste the effort, right? You will have to have it, going perfect. Well, yeah, perfect in the sense that as much as you can, right? So we're going to put all those conditions in advance, okay? But remember that we've talked about the last chapter about designs. So what if you have questions or you have items that you're going to collect and they have been badly designed. Can you believe? And this is your baseline. If you have a bad baseline, you've destroyed it because you cannot compare. Yes, you realize, well, I should have asked this way, or I should have recorded this way. Yeah, but if you didn't, then of course you don't have the pre, you will have only the post, you will have post intervention, or you will have a few years later and then you can compare like with like, you're going to have a different thing. So yeah, as you can see, very important to get it right from the start. Okay. So it means, of course, that you need to know your subject area, and we're going to talk about biases. So you need to know with data collection, there's a lot of play in terms of biases. That some biases are conscious, but a lot of biases are unconscious. You don't realize you're creating a bias by doing it this way rather than the other way. So we need to know all that, okay? But as we all know, you will create your template, you will create your questionnaire. Let's talk about questionnaire for now. The main tool is a questionnaire. Questionnaire because it's full of questions. And what happens is that it's going to be, there are expressions there, and invariably, when you're going to do it in a country, you will have to adapt it, to the expressions in the country, etc. So of course, you have a template, and it changes country by country. Okay, very important is what are the types of content that we're going to have. The most important, the first key concept you need to know is when you have a questionnaire, you need to have the entire tool, the entire instrument full of instructions. So it's not enough. Some people would say, no, but I've trained already my enumerators, my interviewers, my surveyors. Yeah, even if you have, at the time when somebody's filling in a questionnaire, they need, especially if there are situations that are difficult, that are conditional, whatever, you need to have those instructions clearly laid out, clearly written. So and by the way, we're going to talk first about some of those key concepts, and then I'm going to show you, and we're going to go by you looking at the screen yourself. We're going to go with different examples. Definitely, we need examples here. Okay, so when you put instructions, remember one thing: people need to know clearly: is this an instruction or is this a question? So right now, to tell you that instructions for interviewer the instructions need to be in a different type of letter or font. It's usually either capital letters or italics, so that the person quickly realizes, oh, this is for me. I'm not going to ask this to the interviewee, to the responder. This is for me to read, okay, and get it right. So don't forget that. Instructions. Okay, questions. We're going to start by saying questions. There's items, but for questions, there's a lot of questions that are binary, yes or no. Have you ever attended school? Yes or no, and then you follow up with other questions. Sometimes it's multiple answers, right? So you have but you have from 1 to 5, whatever you have to select, and sometimes you select. Most of the time you select one, but there's also questions. There's responses that can be more than one. So you need to be very clear when you see, again, instructions. When is it just one response versus several responses? Okay, and of course, sometimes you categorize, but that's for the analysis, the responses an ordinal way. So this is the first priority, this is the second priority. All that we're going to see when we look at the example. Okay, so other times it's not a yes or no, or I agree or I don't agree or whatever. Sometimes you have to fill in numbers, how old are you? And so you have to add numbers. And so you have to be very clear where you have to put the actual number that it's either said, expressed to you or calculated. Okay, so look at that. There's lots of slightly different things that go on when you are asking in a survey. Okay, so very important, especially now with digital. Many questionnaires are not filled paper-based as they were in the past, although it still happens and still very safe and all that. But often now you have a tablet and it's electronic. So it's very important, when is the question voluntary, right? Optional versus mandatory. If it's mandatory, you know that you cannot leave it blank, right? So in the instructions as well as in the training, you have to know very clearly. But digitally, it's a little easier because you know that if you haven't put anything, you can't advance, right? Your style or your pen, you want to go to the next question. If you haven't put a response there, it won't allow you. So that's a mandatory one. Okay. Okay, we're going to talk about the flow. Very important about the flow, because there are questions that you continue one after the other. Then, of course, there's others that if it's conditional, if you answer one, you continue. If you answer two, you jump. It's a skip. It's called a skip. And the skip could be, just two questions down there, in the vicinity, or it could be an entire new module. So you have to, turn a couple of pages, whatever. So it has to be, once again, very clear how to do that. There are questions, or there are fields, we often call it fields, where you have put your answers, where you, the interviewer, has to calculate. You're given a date of birth, for example. Okay, so you have to calculate. So sometimes you need you need time, or you need a calculator, whatever. Sometimes if it's economy, and somebody tells you how much they earn a week, and you have to multiply times 4, or if it's daily times 30, whatever. There could be calculations to be done. Okay. And what is the purpose? We know the typical is that we're asking either for knowledge. People, do you know about this? We are observing, or we are collecting facts, right? So this is how many chairs there is in this house. Oh, you are observing. Oh, okay. So there is soap in the bathroom or not. There's this, there's that, there's electricity, there's a meter or not. So there are things that you collect as fact, as actual realistic data. And then, of course, there's other things that we're going to talk more about it, which is, what does the person feel about things, perceptions, attitudes, values, all those things. This is the beauty, that you can really explore all very different dimensions. Okay. And of course, practices. So what do you do? And here the most important is, oftentimes I've seen this error. You have to ask, when you ask for something that people have done, don't ever say what, unless you purposely intend it to be that way, but normally it doesn't work well. Don't say, how do you usually do this? No. If you want to know for sure, and why do I say don't ask usually? What do you think? I'm giving you a second to think about it. Because if you ask usually, some people might think usually is in the last 3 times. Some other person might feel, it's in the last month. But somebody might say, well, let me think about the last 6 months. So you see right there, if people use different assumptions to answer, then your response is not going to be standardized. So whenever you are going to ask about practices, you need, usually people give a specific timeline. So you say in the last month, or in the last 6 months, did you do this and that, or did you have this and that, whatever you're asking. Okay, so that's very important. Okay, what we're going to do now, I'm going to give you several screenshots with questions from this DHS questionnaires, and we're going to start discussing them one by one, how different they are. And then if the time allows, we're going to do a final piece on do's and don'ts of questionnaire for formulation. What are things you need to make sure that they are, and then what is it that we need to make sure that you don't commit as a mistake in your questionnaire construction. Okay, so we'll carry on with that. Okay, so now we have the first example of questionnaire. This again from the DHS, Demographic and Health Survey, and you can see some, basic stuff like you have all your questions on the left side, and then on the right side you will have what are the responses. And sometimes in the boxes you'll see, you'll have to fill in the blanks. Other times you have to have it very clear if the interviewer will circle or will add an X or what. Remember, sometimes you could get confused. What if somebody puts an X and then underneath a circle? So it has to be very clear the person is going to circle for example, the answer. Okay, here you have a question: in what month and year were you born? So you can see here that you are adding the boxes where you have months. As you can see clearly, there are two boxes, so they both have to be filled. If it's May, it will have to be 05, not only 5, because everything has to be, imagine if it's even in digitally, you have to make sure that every field is answered. And that's why you also add something here. If the person say that happens several times in many rural areas, many countries, if the person doesn't know the month, then you don't leave it blank. It always has to be filled in. So you put 98. Now, what about year? You have 4 digits here. But what if the person doesn't know the year? You still have to put 9998. Why is it 98 and not 99? All right? And this is because the 99 happens when, for example, this was a paper-based questionnaire. And unfortunately, we could talk about perfection, and unfortunately there is imperfection, and somebody did not put anything here. Maybe if at the time of before adding everything to the data set and the database, you find that nothing was put here, and it can't be nothing, so maybe you'll have to put 99, which means this was an invalid, or this was not filled in as it should have, which is different than the person not knowing. Okay, that's why it's 98 and not 99. Okay, then how old were you at your last birthday? So look at this, so interesting. Why are you asking it if it was already, you ask about the month and year, you ask about the date of birth? It's because perhaps, people want to know if people know exactly. And sometimes here it tells you people people sometimes, they are like 4 days that they're gonna be 55, but they tell you they are 55, and you see here that with the calculation of the day of the survey, it wasn't 55. And that's why some people have realized that oftentimes there are persons who, just, are already thinking they have 1 more year. All right. Other types of questions like this one is very good, moderate. In general, would you say your health is very good, moderate, bad, or very bad? and here you have a chance to answer. Now look at it here. Of course, there's no other instruction, but here the question is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to see how this coding will change if it would be a question that is answered more than one response. But because this is only one response, here it is the code, the response code is in whole numbers. So it only allows you one response. All right. Have you ever attended school? Remember the binary that we said? It's a yes or a no. Here, you can't have a don't know, because the person has to, that's the minimum that they need to know, right? Whether they attended school or no. And then the next, what is the highest level of school you attended? Primary, secondary, or higher? And here again, you have the chance to put one, either 1, 2, or 3. All right. Now here we have slight difference from what we have seen before. So here, for example, you're asking how many sons and how many daughters, but the tricky part is live with you. Why? Because in this particular survey, you want to know how many sons are living with you and how many are not. And so you can see that in the response category, you have yes, remember 2 boxes, because you might have, in some countries still, 10 or more or more, and same with daughters. Okay, now they are differentiated. Here, that it's followed by, do you have any sons or daughters to whom you have given birth who are alive but do not live with you? Now, look at another thing we are watching here. And it's like you're almost repeating the previous concept, that sons, okay? But here, it's very clear that you're saying they are, you gave birth, they are alive. Okay, so this is obviously for mothers, as you can see, but do not live with you, okay? Because somebody could interpret, if you just ask, how many don't live with you, somebody could interpret, oh, because they died, they don't live with me. But here they're saying they are alive. So it's very important that you differentiate very clearly. And you have binary again, yes or no. Now look at this. There is one additional column here that is added, and this is the column for the skip pattern, which means if the respondent answers no, you don't ask 205, you skip to 206. So you can see right here that there is an instruction, because if this is a paper-based, if it's electronic, if it's digitalized, maybe this skip is going to be done automatically. But if not, the enumerator needs to know, okay, I'm not going to ask that. It would be ridiculous that I would ask the following one if the person has answered no. So I skip to 206, and that's where you ask the other question, and then obviously you continue here, all right? So we realized that with the examples and explaining each one in detail, we're going to be over our 20-something minutes that we want for each chapter. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave it here, and with these first examples, and then we're going to continue in what we will be calling something like chapter 7b of questionnaire formulation, and we're going to give you also a few more examples, and then we're going to finalize by saying what is it that we should make sure that we do and we don't in questionnaire formulation. So yeah, keep tuning in until you see this next subchapter coming again to you. Thanks very much. Bye.